The dog came first, a lean cattle mutt with a nicked ear and a coat the color of old straw, trotting along the wind-cut ridge above the canyon flats. His name was Rust, and he moved like he had somewhere to be, ribs sharp under dust-clotted fur, muzzle dark with dried blood from some fight he hadn't quite won or lost. The wind pushed against him, full of sand and heat and the smell of storm. Then something new slipped through it. Not cow, not coyote, not clean death. The scent was blood, iron and bitter, but under it was something stubborn, something still hanging on. Rust slowed, nose low, tail stiff. He angled down the slope, claws scratching stone, following that faint thread of breath and hurt. The canyon floor rose toward him in a red haze. He found her where the prairie broke into shale, lying in a drift of red dust, like she'd fallen from the sky and never bothered to get up. Her dress was torn calico, stuck to her skin with sweat and dirt. Her lips were split. Her eyes were closed. Blood had soaked the ground beneath her right hip and dried in a dark crust. Rust lowered his head and sniffed her face. Her skin smelled hot, wrong. He nudged her shoulder. She didn't move. He whined, high and soft, pacing in a tight circle, pawing at the dirt as if he could dig her back to life. She stirred. A thin sound, more breath than voice, scraped out of her throat. One eye cracked open, white showing all around the green. She looked at the dog like he was a mirage. "Don't go," she rasped. Her voice was dust and pain. "Don't leave me." Rust stayed. He licked her hand once, then turned and ran. By sundown, he had found the only man he still claimed as his own. Jace Reddin lived alone in a house of gray slats and rusted nails out past Hollow Scarwash, where the land fell toward Red Break Canyon and then just gave up for miles. The house leaned into the wind like it was tired of standing. Jace was much the same. He was a cattle rider with a ruined left hand, 2 fingers gone and the others stiff, and a face that hadn't remembered how to smile in years. Folks said he'd left something behind in the war, or maybe someone had taken it from him. No one asked which. In the evenings, he sat on his porch with black coffee gone cold, watching the sun sink behind the canyon rim. Rust was the only living thing he let close, the only one allowed to sleep near his bed. That evening, Rust broke the quiet. He came in fast, hackles up, whining low, pawing at Jace's boot like the world was ending. Jace stood without a word. He slung his rifle across his back and followed the dog into the dusk. The air was thick, heavy, with a storm pushing up from the south. Lightning flashed once over Red Break Canyon, turning the horizon into a jagged bone. They found her under a low bluff where the night wind couldn't quite reach, curled in on herself, one hand pressed weakly toward her hip. Jace crouched beside her. She was young, maybe 17, maybe 20. Sunburned. Freckles smeared together. A bruise in the shape of a hand shadowed one cheek, deep purple beneath the dust. Her wrists were raw, skin broken where rope had bitten in. Her boots were gone. He brushed her hair from her face with his good hand. Her skin burned against his palm. Jace tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against the wound at her hip. The bullet had grazed her, tearing deep but clean along the bone. She flinched, a small, broken sound. Rust stood over them both, ears flat, eyes bright. Jace said nothing. He slid his arms beneath her like she was made of glass and lifted her from the dirt. She was lighter than she looked, a bundle of bone and stubborn breath. He carried her back across the prairie while Rust trotted ahead, turning often to be sure they were still there. The storm broke just as they reached the house. Rain hammered the roof. Wind slammed the shutters. Jace laid her on the bed in the back room, the one he never used, and lit a lamp. He cleaned the wound with rainwater, wrapped it tight with what cloth he had, and forced a little broth between her cracked lips when she surfaced enough to swallow. He didn't ask anything. He didn't speak at all. It was 3 days before she woke all the way. The back room stayed dark and cool. Jace sat in a chair by the door, whittling a hook for the barn door out of a strip of oak, his ruined hand holding the wood steady while the knife moved in his right. Rust lay on the floor, chin across his paws, watching her breathe. Her eyes opened slow, like lifting something heavy. She stared at the ceiling, then turned her head. The dog lifted his ears. Jace stopped the knife. Her voice came rough, sand scraping rock. "Where am I?" Jace stood and poured a cup of water from the pail. "Outskirts of Red Break Canyon," he said. His voice was low and plain. "My place. Name's Jace Reddin." He held the cup to her. Her hands shook when she reached for it. He kept his grip easy, but firm, so she didn't spill. She drank in small gulps, then lowered the cup, eyes on his face. "I'm Hallie," she whispered. She swallowed hard, as if just saying it hurt. "Hallie Wynn." Jace nodded once. "You remember what happened?" Her gaze slid away to the far wall. Her throat worked. "Some," she said. "Enough." She lifted her hand to her hip and winced when her fingers touched the bandage. "Thought I was dead." "You almost were," Jace said. Silence settled. The house creaked. Outside, wind hissed along the eaves. Rust padded over and set his muzzle on the edge of the bed. Hallie's fingers slid into his fur like she was afraid he might vanish if she held too tight. "I can work when I'm better," she said after a while, voice thin but steady. "Don't want to be some debt on you." "You're not," Jace said. Her eyes narrowed just a little, wary. Not grateful, not yet, just watching. She'd seen men promise things before. It showed in the way she didn't quite relax, even lying flat. He stepped back, picked up the knife, and went back to his chair. Jace didn't ask who shot her. He didn't ask who had tied her wrists or why her boots were missing. He changed her bandage twice a day, fed her what he had, and spoke only when she needed something. When she slept, he sat where he could see the door and the window at the same time. The first night she stood on her own 2 feet, the wind came hard off the basin. It slammed the shutters so hard one crack ran down the frame. Rust paced the porch, growling under his breath. Inside, the fire popped and spat. Hallie stood by the hearth, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her bare feet made small prints in the dust on the floorboards. She watched the flames as if waiting for them to turn on her. She spoke without looking at Jace. "They thought I'd die out there." Jace set his rifle on the table and glanced up. "Who did?" "3 men." Her jaw tightened. "One named Vance Crow. The others I didn't know." Jace felt something shift in his chest, an old weight waking up. "Why'd they leave you alive?" "I shot one," Hallie said. She still didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the coals. "Then I ran. Bullet caught me. They figured the land would finish the job." She curled a hand tighter in the blanket. Her knuckles went white. "I didn't mean to kill him," she whispered. "He grabbed me, said I was promised." Jace's brow twitched. "Promised?" "Sold, really." Her voice turned flat. "Pa traded me for his whiskey debts. Crow runs land east of Iron Notch. They call it a ranch. It's a pen for girls." The room seemed to shrink. Wind howled down the chimney and scattered sparks across the hearth. Rust lifted his head, ears sharp. Jace rose slowly. "How long were you there?" 3 weeks. She let the words fall like stones. "Long enough." Silence pressed at the walls. The fire sank lower. Outside, the night was nothing but wind and black, and the distant roar of the canyon. Hallie stared into the flames. "I'd rather die on the prairie than go back." Jace watched her for a long moment, the blanket pulled tight around her thin shoulders, the bruise on her cheek fading but still there, the scar at her wrist raw and red. "You won't," he said. It was not loud. It was not soft. It was a promise, plain and heavy as iron. Rust settled back down with a sigh, as if that answer was enough for him. The next morning, Hallie fed the chickens. She walked slow, favoring her right side, the wound pulling with each step, but she didn't ask for help. Her braid hung down her back in a rough rope. Jace had found her some worn boots that almost fit. Rust shadowed her every move, nose bumping her leg from time to time like he was checking she was real. Jace stood by the barn, arms folded, hat brim low, watching without letting it show. She scattered feed with careful hands, paused to scratch the lame hen under its wing, and kept her eyes on the ground like the sky might hold trouble. She didn't speak of leaving. She didn't ask what lay beyond the canyon or how far Crow's Reach ran. She slept in the back room, kept her own bandages clean once she could, and only cried once, in the barn, where she thought no one could hear. Jace heard anyway. One sharp sob, caught quick, like something tearing on barbed wire. Then nothing. By the second week, Hallie was standing straighter. She peeled potatoes at the table, moved around the small kitchen like she'd lived in tighter spaces than this. She didn't flinch anymore when Jace stepped past her, but when the house went too quiet, she would glance over, as if waiting for the silence to turn into a blow. One evening, while Jace was mending tack, he asked, "You ever have a dog?" Quote. Hallie kept her eyes on the knife in her hand. "Cattle mud," she said. "Died when I was 12. Name was Roper." "What happened?" "Pa sold him for a jug of corn liquor." Jace didn't answer. Rust snored softly by the hearth, paws twitching in some safer dream. "I liked that dog more than my brother," Hallie said. "More than Pa, too." She set the knife down and met Jace's gaze for the first time without looking away. "Sometimes I think that dog was the only thing God ever gave me that was mine." Their eyes held. Something small and hard passed between them, like a coin pressed from one palm to another. 3 nights later, a rider crossed the ranch line. Jace heard the hoofbeats long before he saw the shape. He stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, and watched the rise where the sagebrush thinned. The moon was almost full, painting a pale line across the pasture. The rider eased up just long enough for the light to catch on the edge of his coat. Then he turned and rode on without a word. Jace stayed on the porch until dawn, the boards cold under his bare feet. In the morning, Hallie was already by the gate, Rust at her heel. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "They're looking," she said. Jace nodded. That one wasn't local. "You recognized him?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He studied her. She stood straight, one hand resting on Rust's head, the other curled at her side. "I'll teach you to shoot," Jace said. Hallie's mouth tightened. She looked out over the empty land, toward where the rider had come. "Good," she said. Rust's ears pricked. The wind shifted over the prairie, carrying the smell of dust and something darker. The waiting had begun. Hallie learned fast. Faster than Jace expected, faster than most men he'd trained in the war. She listened with her whole body, shoulders tight, jaw set, breath steady. By the end of the first week, she could reload a revolver quicker than Jace could with one good hand. By the end of the second, she hit tin plates at 30 paces without flinching. She never complained about the recoil. She never asked if she was doing well. She just kept going until her arms shook. Rust watched every lesson from a patch of shade near the barn, tail thumping once whenever Hallie hit true. The land hardened with her. Heat pressed down, dry and sharp. The earth cracked where the creek bed narrowed. Dust rolled in slow sheets across the flats, and the sky turned the color of hammered copper. Jace kept his eyes on the ridges every morning, listening for the wrong hoofbeat, watching for a glint of sunlight on steel that didn't belong. Hallie watched too. She always knew where the rifle was, always kept her back to a wall when she could. Jace didn't comment. She didn't need easing. She needed preparation, and he understood the kind of fear that lived behind her eyes, one that didn't tremble, only waited. One night, she didn't wait. Jace woke to Rust, snarling low, teeth bared, body stiff. Moonlight leaked through the curtain. Hallie stood in the doorway of his room, hair loose, breathing shallow, rifle in her hands. "It's nothing," Jace said quietly. "No," she whispered. "Something's out there." He rose, grabbed the shotgun from beside the bed. Rust pushed between them, head down, tail stiff. The dog didn't bark. He didn't need to. They stepped outside into a night so still it pressed on their ears. Then, a sound. A soft step. A breath. Too controlled to be an animal. Jace motioned for cover. Hallie sank behind the porch post, rifle aimed. He cracked the door wider, shotgun resting against his shoulder. 10 yards out stood a man. Tall. Coat slick with ice, though there wasn't frost. A figure behind him on horseback waited in the dark. The tall man raised his hands. "Evening," he drawled. "Looking for something that belongs to me?" Jace didn't blink. "Don't see anything of yours here." The man smiled, a slow, rotten curl of teeth. "Her girl goes by Hallie Wynn." Hallie's breath hitched once, only once. "My name," she murmured, "was never mine to give." Jace's grip tightened. "Get off my land." "She's promised," the man said. "By trade." Jace stepped forward. "Trade's over." The man tilted his head. "Then it's war." Jace shut the door. They did not attack that night. They didn't need to. They wanted the fear to sit heavy, to chew at the edges of sleep. But Hallie did not break. She poured black coffee and sat at the table until dawn, cleaning her revolver piece by piece, her hands steady even when her voice wasn't. Jace watched her from the stove, eyes carved in shadow. "They're testing you," he said. "They'll find I'm not soft," she replied. Rust thumped his tail once. By the next afternoon, they found the doghouse torched. Nothing left but blackened boards and a patch of scorched earth. Rust paced the ground where it had stood, whining low. Hallie knelt and touched the ash with 2 fingers. Her face didn't twist in anger. It hardened. "They'll come again," she said. Jace nodded. "Then we prepare." And they did, with a quiet, relentless purpose. Hallie dug pits along the fence line, shallow enough to hide under grass, deep enough to break a leg. She filled them with broken glass and rusted nails. Jace stretched wire between rocks in the ravine. They rigged the porch with kindling and lamp oil. They reinforced the barn doors with iron bar and old harness straps. Hallie slept with her revolver beneath her hand, boots on the floor where she could reach them in one step. Rust slept in the hall, nose toward the door, body tense even in dreams. The ranch turned from a home into a fortress. One evening, as Hallie cleaned the shotgun for the 5th time, she asked, "You believe in fate?" "No." "Then why'd your dog find me?" Jace didn't answer at first. He watched her from across the table. In the lantern light, she looked older and younger at the same time. Scarred, but not small. Finally, he said, "Maybe he saw something I didn't." Rust nudged Hallie's knee, as if seconding that truth. The next warning came at dusk. An empty whiskey bottle hung from the fence post, tied with a leather strip. Crow's brand. Hallie stared at it for a long time, face blank. "He means to play." "Not anymore," Jace said. He dropped the bottle into the stove. The glass cracked and spat in the flames. "What happens when he comes himself?" Hallie asked. Jace stared into the fire. "Then we finish it." She lifted her chin. "Don't let him take me." Quote, "Won't happen." "Promise?" There was no pause. "Yes." Her shoulders loosened. Not much, not soft, but enough. Winter came early that year. Snow fell hard, coating the yard in white that glowed against the dark. The creek froze. The wind cut like a blade. Hallie split wood until her hands blistered. Jace patched the roof in the cold that stung the bones. They didn't talk much, but when they did, it wasn't the kind of silence meant to hide things. It was the kind that held breath and warmth, and the rhythm of 2 people working in the same life. Hallie told him once about her mother, how she'd nearly drowned in a river as a girl until a dog dragged her to the bank. "God doesn't save people," she said. "Just sends dogs." Jace didn't say she was wrong. Rust lifted his head and wagged his tail once. Deep winter, cold enough to crack the pump handle. Hallie wore Jace's old sheepskin coat, big enough to swallow her, the hem dragging in the snow. Her limp was almost gone. Her eyes were sharp. The girl Jace carried from the canyon had vanished. What remained was forged from fear and fire. Then came the smoke. A dark ribbon rising from the south ridge. Hallie saw it first. "Scouts," she said. "Crow's men." "How many?" Jace asked. "Enough." They prepared through the night. Jace brought up his old war gear from under the floor. Long-barreled pistols, a carbine with a scorched stock, extra rounds wrapped in oilcloth. Hallie took one of the revolvers in both hands. "It's heavy," she said. "You'll carry it anyway." She nodded. "You ever shoot a man square?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "No, just one, when I ran." "It hurts after," Jace said. "I know." He didn't tell her she didn't. Snow fell again on the third night after the smoke appeared. Thick, silent flakes swallowed the world. Hallie lay awake, rifle beside her, boots under the bed, hair tied back tight. Rust growled once. Low. Certain. Hallie sat up, gripping the rifle. She crossed the floor soundless, breath cold in her chest. Jace was already standing at the door, shotgun in hand. He cracked it open. A figure stood 10 yards out, a second farther back on horseback. Hallie lifted the rifle. Jace said nothing. The man stepped forward, coat heavy, eyes dead. "Evening, friend," he called. "I'm looking for the girl." Hallie's pulse did not quicken. Jace's voice was flat. "Wrong land." "She's promised," the man said. "Crow, don't forget what's his." "She wasn't his." "World says different." Hallie stepped closer, the rifle resting easy in her hands. "The world's been wrong before." The man grinned, a thin, knowing curl. "War it is then." He turned and rode off, snow swallowing the sound. They didn't sleep again. They didn't speak much either. They only prepared. The next day, Jace and Hallie dug the last trench. Rust stayed close, tail stiff, eyes scanning the edge of the trees. Late afternoon, Hallie paused, shovel stuck in the frozen dirt. "Jace?" He looked up. "What if he doesn't come? What if he burns the place instead?" "He won't," Jace said. "Crow likes to touch what he thinks he owns." Hallie's breath plumed faint in the cold. "I'm not his." "No," Jace said. "You're not." Quote. Something in her face eased, but only enough to shift the air between them. That night, while cleaning her knife, Hallie whispered, "Not anymore." Jace heard it. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. War was coming, and they were ready for it. The Prairie just didn't know yet. The sun was sharp the day the first one died. Hallie spotted him in the trees north of the paddock. Thin man, crouched behind a split boulder, spyglass glinting in the morning light. He leaned out just long enough for his face to show. He wasn't Crow. He was young, nervous, sent to measure the land before worse men came. Hallie didn't shout. She didn't rush. She dropped flat to her belly and slithered along the ridge. Jace had dug into a blind. Rust was already there, belly pressed to the snow, ears pinned flat. Jace joined them a moment later, carbine in hand. Hallie breathed once, steady. "He's mine," she whispered. Jace held her eyes for a heartbeat. Then he passed her the rifle. The man leaned out again. Hallie fired. The crack split the air, sharp as bone. The man folded back without a sound. A crow burst from a nearby pine, cawing once before settling again. Hallie crawled forward just enough to see the blood bloom red against the snow. She exhaled. "That's one," Jace said. Rust nuzzled her hand once, as if checking she was still whole. They dragged the body to the old windmill and hung him by the ankles, a bullet casing pressed into his palm. It wasn't cruelty, it was a message. Crow liked messages. Now he had one back. The first fire came that night. Brush stacked near the barn went up in a sudden blaze, fed by lamp grease. Jace ran first, boots punching through snow crust. Hallie was faster. She grabbed a bucket, doused the flames, stomped embers under a wet cloth wrapped around her boots. Smoke curled mean and black. Sparks leapt toward the roof before the wind shifted and shoved them away. 2 riders vanished across the ridge, silhouettes cutting through moonlight. "They're probing," Hallie said. "No more of that," Jace answered. They worked through the dark. Wire traps along the ravine, nails hammered into stakes, trip lines hidden under snow. A bear trap sharpened and reset behind the root cellar. Hallie rigged chicken wire under deadwood, strung with cowbells. "They'll hear us," Jace warned. "That's the point." She slept with her pistol in her hand, blanket pulled to her waist. Rust lay in the doorway, watching the night breathe. Danner Crow came in person on the 6th day after the scout fell. He didn't ride up alone. 4 men stepped behind him, 2 with rifles, 2 with knives. Crow carried nothing but a smile. A thin one, greasy as lamp smoke. Jace waited on the porch, shotgun on his shoulder. Hallie stayed behind the doorway, rifle sight lined through a hole she'd carved into the wood. Rust crouched at her thigh, silent and ready. Crow tipped his hat. "Afternoon, Reddin. You know why I'm here." "You're trespassing," Jace said. Crow chuckled. "Now don't play the righteous man. You've got a girl in there that ain't yours." "She's not property. World says different." "Then the world's wrong." Crow's grin sharpened. "Tell you what, I'll trade. 1 wagon of cattle. $50. You let her walk back on her 2 legs." Jace said nothing. Hallie stepped out from behind the doorway, rifle raised, breath steady. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said. Crow's smile cracked. "Not by much, but enough. Girl," he said softly, "you were promised. Not to you." Jace didn't blink. Crow stepped forward. Hallie pulled the trigger. The bullet clipped his cheek, slicing a red line across his face. He fell back, grabbing at the wound. His men scrambled. Jace fired, dropping one with a blast to the chest. Another fled. Hallie rolled behind the barrels, reloaded, fired again. A scream echoed through the trees. When the smoke cleared, Crow and the last gunman vanished into the dark. The wounded man they caught crawling, Jace dragging him by the collar across the snow. Hallie knelt beside him, eyes cold, breathing slow. "Tell him what you saw," she said. The man spit blood. "He'll come for you. You're his." Hallie leaned closer, voice low. "I was promised," she said, "but not to him." She fired once. The prairie went still. They burned the bodies that night. The flames reached up like fingers clawing at the stars. Hallie lit the fire. Jace stacked the wood. Rust sat between them, watching without sound. The smell carried across the canyon like a warning carved into the wind. "He'll be back," Jace said. "He'll bring more," Hallie said. Jace nodded. "Then we finish it." Hallie met his eyes, steady, unbroken. The dog pressed against her knee. She didn't push him away. The thaw came hard. Snow melted into mud. Water ran thick and brown across the creek bed. Days turned gray, heavy with the weight of something coming. Hallie spent the nights drawing maps in ash on the table. Canyon lines, tree clusters, high ground, escape routes. She sharpened knives until her hands cramped. She buried dynamite jars wired with nails. She cleaned the rifle until it shone like water. Her sleeves were always rolled, her hair always tied back. The fear in her eyes had burned down to something sharper. One night on the roof, Jace handed her a folded paper. A telegram. "Civ dead stop. No survivors stop." They took her stop. Hallie read it once. Twice, folded it soft. "Your wife?" she asked. Jace nodded. "And your girl?" "Yes." She didn't offer pity. She offered truth. "We stop him," she said. Jace breathed in, slow, heavy. "Yes." The final warning came at dusk. A riderless horse galloping in from the east, foam on its flanks, fear in its eyes. A strip of Hallie's old dress tied around its neck. Hallie touched the cloth without blinking. "They're ready," she said. Jace strapped on both pistols, loaded the carbine. Checked every fuse. Rust paced the yard, growling under his breath. They didn't talk that night. They didn't need to. Just past midnight, the cowbells sang. Clang, clang, silence. Hallie stepped outside. Wind in her hair. Rifle raised, heart calm. Jace followed. Rust ahead, pointing with his whole body. The moon lit the world silver. Grass bent in a slow wave. Then came the sound of horses, 6 or more, moving along the creek bed. Hallie knelt behind the gatepost. "Not yet." Jace whispered. They waited. One man stepped into the white stone line. Hallie fired. He dropped. Another lunged forward into a trap. A spring line snapped. Bone cracked. A scream tore into the night. Gunfire erupted, wild, furious. Bullets snapped posts and shattered glass. The barn wall shook. The porch rail splintered. Jace fired twice, a third time, dropping shadows in the grass. Then, "Hallie!" a voice roared. "Crow!" She rose from cover, eyes cold. "I'm here." Gunfire flashed. She rolled, fired, rolled again. A man screamed and fell. The barn caught fire, flames licking skyward like hungry tongues. Crow strode through the sparks, eyes glowing, pistol in hand, whip in the other. "You were mine!" he bellowed. Hallie didn't step back. "No, you just thought so." She fired. The bullet struck his shoulder. He spun. Jace stepped out of the shadows behind him. "Twice now," Jace said. "You aimed at what's not yours." Crow turned too slow. Jace fired. One shot to the chest, one to the jaw. Crow dropped to his knees. Hallie walked forward, smoke rising behind her, rust at her heel. Crow spat blood. "You were nothing," he gasped. "A debt, a sack of bones." Hallie leveled the pistol. "And you were dust," she said. "You just didn't know it yet." She pulled the trigger. The sound rolled across the prairie like thunder. Rust barked once, then silence. By dawn, the fire was out. 4 bodies burned with it. The rest fled. No one came back. Not ever. Hallie stood beside the ashes, Jace's coat on her shoulders. She held the pistol in both hands. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. The wind moved over the canyon like a long, slow sigh. Spring came in time. Grass grew over the battleground. The creek cleared. The house still bore its scars, burn marks, bullet holes, shattered windows, but they lived among them, letting the ghosts keep their places. The ranch changed. People came. Not many, just enough. A boy fleeing a mine, a woman with a child, a man who couldn't speak, a girl who carved wood but no words. They came from the broken places of the world. They stayed because Hallie told them they could. Rust watched them, as if counting. Hallie taught them how to stay alive. Jace taught them how to build again. By summer, the ranch wasn't a place of hiding. It was a place of choosing. One evening, Jace found Hallie barefoot in the yard, watching lightning flicker along the edge of the world. "You ever think about what comes after?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "I used to," she said, "but not anymore." "Why not?" "Because this is it." He stepped beside her, not touching, just close enough to share the sky. "You remember when you asked about fate?" he said. She smiled a little. "I remember. I think Rust didn't find you by chance." She nodded. Her eyes shone in the stormlight. "No," she said softly, "not chance." They didn't speak again. Words weren't needed. Rust died that fall. No warning. Just lay down by the chicken coop and didn't rise again. Hallie found him at dawn. She sat beside him a long time, hands quiet in her lap. When Jace came out, she said only, "He saw me first." They buried Rust on the ridge facing west. Hallie carved a stone. Rust, guardian, free. Wild sage grew over his grave the next spring. Years passed. Folks whispered about the girl who lived on Reddin Ranch, the one who survived a canyon, burned a monster's world to ash, and walked free. They said she was the promised bride of the land itself, claimed not by a man but by fate, carried there by a dog who knew before anyone else. They were right. And she never walked alone again. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to From Wild West 2, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.